And he is with me, as I say. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Jeremy Corbyn said at the weekend, or he was asked this question, if you could stop Brexit, would you? And Mr. Corbyn said, we can't stop it. Is he right?
Well, we had a big discussion about this at our Labour Party conference in September. Lots and lots of delegates there and had a big vote. And the Labour Party position was set out really looking at the decisions that are going to come up this autumn. And we agreed that we would only back the deal if it met our tests. And that doesn't look to be the case at the moment. If the deal didn't get through, we would call for a general election. If that didn't happen, we must have all options on the table, and that includes the option of a public vote. So Jeremy's signed up to that. I'm signed up to that. The whole Labour Party signed up to it. Yes, I mean this was.
So why didn't he say that?
I think it was the Tuesday lunchtime of our conference. We got this motion through, and everybody's coalesced around it. So, of course, there are slightly different voices in Labour as everywhere, but actually the party position was we did have those discussions. We did reach that position, and that is where we stand.
As you say, the party, the Labour Party conference supported the idea that Labour must support all options remaining on the table. Quite clear about that. But let's come back to Mr. Corbyn, because A, he says to Der Spiegel, we can't stop it. B, he's asked subsequently by Channel 4 about a second vote, and he says, no, not really. The referendum took place. So it's pretty clear from everything he says, and he's sort of, I emphasise, sort of consistent about this. He doesn't want a second referendum.
Well, I mean, insofar as he says the referendum took place, of course he's right about that. But on this question of options on the table, and we've had a long discussion about it, and we did agree all options to remain on the table, including the option of a public vote. That's obviously in the event that the deal doesn't get through, in the event there isn't a general election. But that is the position because, as Laura said, actually at that stage, difficult decisions are going to have to be made. So neither Jeremy nor anybody else has altered that position, and that is the position of the Labour Party.
Well, it's certainly, if you're just listening to what he says as he says it, you're left somewhat confused. You'd acknowledge that, wouldn't you? I mean, maybe that is the whole purpose, that you are meant to be confused, because Labour itself, as is the Conservative Party, is divided. You have Momentum on the one hand saying very firmly, we want to remain. You have many constituents saying, no, we voted to leave, we want to leave. So you do have a difficult position, don't you?
John, I'm not going to pretend there aren't different views in the Labour Party. That wouldn't be real. But that's why we worked so hard to say, well, what is the common ground? What is it that we, as the Labour Party, can all agree on as to the way forward, and to be practical about it and think of the decisions as they'll arise. And that's why the first thing we asked ourselves was, what are we going to vote on this deal if we get a deal? Second, are we going to call for a general election? The answer to that, of course, is yes. And then third, in the event that doesn't happen, are we agreed that all options are on the table, including the option of having a public vote? And so we agreed on that. Now, that doesn't mean, of course, there aren't different views. It doesn't mean that people believe more strongly or less strongly in that, because, the referendum split families, communities, parties.
Indeed.
And so the Labour Party has a healthy discussion. But did we reach an agreement? Yes, we did.
But
are we sticking with it? Yes, we are.
The difficulty, though, is you're sort of frozen between the two, aren't you? I mean, can we take it as read that, knowing what you know now about the deal that she is probably going to deliver very shortly, you would vote, at least you would instruct your MPs, Mr. Corbyn would instruct his MPs to vote against it?
Well, let me start with this. There's no duty to vote for the wrong deal.
No, I didn't suggest there was.
And we will obviously look at what comes back. We're duty-bound to do that. We don't know yet quite what it's going to be. But the problem that we've got, Prime Minister's got, is that she's unable to negotiate genuinely in the national interest, because she's got to look over her shoulder the whole time.
As every leader does, as Mr. Corbyn is doing at the moment.
But it's really because I had thought that the Prime Minister might ask for Parliament to back her negotiating objectives and put it to a vote. So then she could say, I've got Parliament behind me. She refused.
Too late for that now.
Too late.
We know where we are.
But now what's emerging this morning, and Laura was touching on this, is that she appears now not even really to have got the backing of her cabinet all those weeks ago. So she's proceeded without any solid backing.
Well, not all of them. There are some.
Well, we'll see. But it looks as though she has got neither the backing of Parliament nor the backing of her cabinet.
Right.
And then to turn to the Labour Party and say, well, will you help me over the line? I've cobbled something together. It's not really a good deal.
Well, you're not helping her over the line, are you, in a sense? Because, and anyway, this isn't, or it shouldn't be, should it, a party political issue. You should be doing, it sounds as if I'm preaching at you now, which I promise I'm not. I'm asking a genuine question. You've got to do what's in the best interest of the nation. And this is crucially important.
I completely agree with that. And I think that we should have had an honest discussion about the priorities at the start, about how we preserve our economy. And we should have listed what are the existing commitments we've made under the Good Friday Agreement that are going to constrain the sort of deal we can actually come back with. Had we had that discussion in Parliament and got the objectives voted on, we'd have been in a completely different place. Now, I realise that at this stage, you and others can challenge me to say, well, it's all very well now saying that. But we are only in these last sort of days, weeks and months in this position because the Prime Minister refused. I mean, she never wanted Parliament to discuss and agree her objectives. She resisted every amendment that we, businesses, trade unions put forward. She didn't really want to mean...
Well, she had two constituents to listen to, didn't she? But let's your position. You wrote in the Sunday Times that if the deal if the deal's rejected, Parliament must take back control. Now, how does Parliament take back? Because Parliament can't negotiate with Brussels.
No, it can't. But what Parliament can do is to indicate what it thinks should happen. And I am confident that the majority in Parliament would not countenance no deal. So the question is, can Parliament stop no deal if it becomes necessary?
Should it? Should Parliament reject a no deal as far as you are concerned?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'll work really hard.
And how does that happen?
We can pass motions. There'll be a discussion as to whether they're binding or not. But frankly, if there's a motion...
They wouldn't be binding, would they?
Well, they might or they might not. But even that, but let's argue against myself. Let's assume it isn't. If there was a motion that, 400 plus MPs supported saying we do not countenance no deal and a minority countenance no deal, the Prime Minister would then have to go forward in the teeth of Parliament and add this on. Dominic Raab, the Brexit Secretary, published 106 technical notices over the course of the summer. They indicate that to prepare for no deal, the government needs to make 51 changes to legislation. Well, that means we're going to be voting pretty well every day of the week between now and March on legislation.
So there should be an extension.
Well, but the idea that Parliament's not going to have the opportunity to assert itself over no deal, if we can't get motions through, we'll pass amendments to legislation. And the idea that somehow the Prime Minister could organise things so you don't have any vote on anything of substance until April next year is unthinkable. And I don't think this Prime Minister would do it. I mean, of course, I'm critical of her on a number of fronts, but I don't think she would simply take us out of the EU without a deal in the teeth of the vast majority in Parliament. I don't think because she's got a deep sense of duty. She knows the ruptures that would cause, not just on trade, but on security, on counter-terrorism. She knows that. She's very strong on things like counter-terrorism.
The problem for you is that you have these 6 tests, or whatever you call them, one of which is getting the exact same benefits as being in the customs union and the single market. But that is simply cloud cuckoo land, unless you can tell me this morning that you have had somebody, the Labour Party has had somebody telling it in Brussels, a senior figure, that actually that's possible. I bet you can't tell me that.
Well, John, 2 things about the test. The first is I think people appreciate they actually were based on the commitments the government said and made at the time it started the negotiation. So exact same benefits was David Davis, endorsed effectively by the Prime Minister because while I put the
but this
test out
is you
there,
talking now, isn't it?
No,
This is you saying we, if we were in power, we, the Labour Party, could deliver these. But on what basis?
I'm just describing when we said to the Prime Minister, you can start. We'll vote for Article 50 to let you start the process. We said, but we're going to hold you to your promises when you get to the end of the process. I think that's the way the opposition should operate. But just let me...
So in that case, you definitely would vote against, in that case. I mean, because we know that she is not going to bring back a deal that gives us the exact same benefits as being in the customs union and the single market.
Well, let's just dissect that just very briefly. There are benefits of the customs union. It protects manufacturing. It actually delivers on the border in Northern Ireland. Can they be replicated in a customs union? Yes, I believe that they can. And yes, I believe that's a negotiation that could be had. In other words, if the Prime Minister was to say a long-term comprehensive customs union is a negotiating objective, I genuinely believe there's a discussion to be had in Brussels about how you would achieve that. I'm not going to pretend that would be easy. I'm not going to pretend it wouldn't be push and pull and there would be lots of difficult interviews with you and others. But I genuinely believe that if we said we want to be economically close and that we want a customs union as one of the components, that is a discussion that could be had, and it could have been had over the last 2 years had the Prime Minister come to Parliament to say, what do you think the objectives should be?
Sir Keir Starmer, thank you very much.